Hi students, this section is working with solving absolute value equations and inequalities. So with this section, we're going to look at absolute value. We worked with absolute value a little bit at the beginning of the year, but now we're going to look at this again. When working with absolute value equations and inequalities, to solve absolute value equations and inequalities, you can use the fact that the expression inside the absolute value symbol can be either positive or negative. And as you might recall from when we first initially looked at this a few months back, you might see something where you have the absolute value of 5, which equals 5, and sometimes you have the absolute value of -5, and that's also going to give you 5. So it means how many jumps does it take for you to get from 0 to that number? So when we're solving working with the equal sign here, we're going to set this up to have it be equal to 8 and to -8. So here we have x minus 4 equals 8. We'll solve that originally how it's written, but then we also need to solve this in the terms of x minus 4 equals -8. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So x is going to equal 12, or x can equal, if I add 4 to this other situation here, x is going to equal -4. So that is my answer for A. Now for B, notice we have the absolute value of 5x plus 1 inside the absolute value sign, but then outside we have plus 3. What I'm going to do is subtract 3 to both sides first, and then we can solve it where it's equal to both the positive and negative situation. So we have here the absolute value of 5x plus 1 equals 14 minus 3 is 11. So we're going to solve this in the terms of 5x plus 1 equals 11, and 5x plus 1 equals -11. I'll subtract for this first situation 1 to both sides, and we get 5x equals 10. Divide 5 to both sides, and x is going to equal 2. If I solve the other one here, we're going to subtract 1 to both sides, and we get 5x equals -12. Divide 5 to both sides, and -12 divided by 5, that's going to give me an answer of 2.4. That's -2.4. So x will equal -2.4, and that'll be my answer for that. So for the for equations, you're going to have 2 answers here. But now when we get into the next slide, we're working with inequality. So very similarly, we're going to set this up to be the absolute value of x minus 4 is less than 3, and then set it up in the negative situation also. So if we have x minus 4 is less than 3, we'll solve this. We're going to add 4 to both sides. So we're going to get x is less than 7. Now let's solve this for x minus 4 is less than -3. Now when we add the negative with the inequality, we have to reverse the inequality to make the statement true, similar to what we were working with in previous sections, almost like the dividing or multiplying of negative numbers. So the way we set this up is x minus 4 is greater than -3. So we'll solve this by adding 4 to both sides. So x has to be greater than 4, and -3 is 1. So the way we can write this is if it's x is less than 7 and x is greater than 1, the way we'd write this inequality is 1 is less than x and x is less than 7. So I can have 1, 2, 3. So I can have an open circle at 1, an open circle at 7, and I can shade everything in between, and x is going to be everything in between 1 and 7. So when we graph this, this is like an and situation if we're thinking about our previous section, working with the ands and the ors. Here we have another absolute value, solving with absolute value and inequalities. Here we're going to add 3 first to both sides. So we have here 2x plus 1 is greater than or equal to 6 plus 3 is going to give me 9. I'll solve it in that terms. But then I also have to solve it in the terms of 2x plus 1 is greater than or equal to negative 9. But remember, when I add in that negative, I have to reverse the sign. So what it really is I'm going to solve it in the terms of 2x plus 1 is less than or equal to negative 9. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to subtract 1 to both sides. So I have 2x is less than or equal to negative 10. Divide both sides by 2. So I have x is less than or equal to negative 10 divided by 2 is going to give me negative 5. So the way I read this, the green situation, x is greater than or equal to 4. And x is less than or equal to negative 5. This would be an or situation if we're thinking of compound inequalities from our last section. So we would have an open circle here at negative 5. I'm sorry, we have a closed circle at negative 5. X is less than or equal to negative 5. So we're shading to the left. X is everything to the left. And the green situation here, we go over to 4. That's going to be a closed circle at 4. X is greater than or equal to 4, so we're going to be shading to the right, and that would be x. So here I've solved for this absolute value inequality situation, and I've graphed. Remember, when you are solving in the terms of negative, you have to flip the sign to make it a true situation. And that is it for these notes.